Hi everyone, welcome back to Colouring in Lost in Time by RJ Hampson, and today's page is Roman Senate, set in Imperial Rome. Mr Fogherty drops his matches, Nero has an idea. So Mr Fogherty's starting to cause problems now by changing history a little bit. So I'm going to colour in this one using Ohuhu markers. I have the set that has a broad tip and a fine tip. And this is a set of 200 colours. Some of my colours are drying up. So to help supplement that, I have a 6-pack here of greys, which is the brand called Born, B-O-R-N, and they are from Officeworks in Australia. And I also have this small set of Creative Place graphic markers. This is Aldi brand, and this is the grey set as well. So if I come across any dry markers in my Ohuhu, I will supplement them with those marker sets. And I've got some paper here to try colours on, and I've got backing sheets in, so I'm going to get started. So it's just hopefully not too many shadows on the page there. So the reason that I chose all those grey markers is that this picture here set in Rome, I like to use a lot of grey on these sorts of pictures and then build up colour with pencil if I need to. So I'm going to get started with some warm greys to start with. So there we go. The gentleman across the road always seems to come home on his motorbike when I start recording, but so I'm going to choose some of the warm greys, particularly lighter ones to start with. So I'm just going to get those out. So I might start with warm grey 160, and I'll show you a little bit about how I like to do stone or concrete. So Russell has left a few little marks, you know, little round bits and so on that look like they're texture in the stone. So where's the darker one here? I've got a 180 here, warm grey 180. So what I like to do is get the caps loosened off, and I like to use the colours in conjunction with each other while they're still wet. So where I want a little bit darker, I'm going to blend that out straight away with the lighter colour. Now don't get too hung up on whether you have the same marker as me or the same colours as me. The concept will work, you know, whatever markers you've got. Play around with them and see whether the same method of working will work for your markers. I find most alcohol markers work the same way. Permanent markers are a different thing because they work a little bit differently, but even with permanent markers I still do blending this way quite often. So I think I might do a page in the future where I actually use some Sharpies and permanent markers and give you an idea of how that works for me with those. Now I'm going to get warm grey 150, and I'm going to do a lighter grey down here. And this marker is getting very dry and a bit patchy, but that actually works in my favour here for doing stone, concrete, you know, cement, all those sorts of finishes. It actually works quite well having that lighter patchy colour. So I'm actually going to do that section in it as well. So very, very dry. And then going back to the warm grey 160, I'm going to use that to imply a little bit of shadow. So working while the marker is still damp means that you can blend those colours together. So even though this one is very dry, because I'm using it with that darker colour that is quite damp still, it is working to blend together. And basically that's all I do with an alcohol marker when I'm trying to blend them. So like pencil, like anything else, it is a case of practice. I'm just going to put the marker down before I colour the wrong thing. With any sort of medium, when you're blending, you really cannot get past practicing. Practice, practice, practice. In fact, with any art technique, it's exactly the same. Without practicing, you're not going to get any better. There's very few people who can just pick up a pen or a pencil or marker and create something flawlessly first go without practicing and trying. So building up skills takes a little bit of time. So if you're new to colouring and you're admiring some really advanced colouring techniques that people have got, don't get discouraged, because it does take time to practice and build up your own repertoire of skills. And some things you may never pick up. Some things will, never be your thing. And that's okay. But you will find what you are good at, and it is going to require practice to keep doing it. So I'm just going to have a look and see in these sets here whether there are... I know this one has got one called Whisper, which is a warm grey. So I might get that one out and ready. And let's have a look what this one's got here. This one's got a warm grey one. And a warm grey 4. So let's just have a look off to the side here. So this is warm grey 1. And if I look at warm grey 160, there's a G there so I know what they are. The colours really are quite similar, so I will be able to supplement that one in there. And this one is E685 Whisper. So they are all very similar. As they're drying, they're very similar, and they're all going to work together, I hope. So that's good to know. Let's keep those off to the side for now. And what was the lighter one I used? 150. It's getting very dry, that one. Okay, so that gives me some ideas of different things that I can use instead of that dry one. So this is called Whisper. Now sometimes that chisel tip is just that little bit too bulky for getting in some of these tighter, smaller areas, the detailed areas. So now I'm going to get the warm grey 180 out. And use those together and see what happens. You can also build your colours, of course, by layering the same colour over and over. You just need to wait for your layers to dry before you can keep doing that though. So again, I'm looking at the small little sketchy lines, the hatching that RJ has indicated some texture or shadow perhaps. You need to look at the picture and assess what you think it is, whether it's just texture lines or whether it is actually shadow, and determine how dark you're going to go with those. So this is what I do. I keep going back and forward, giving the paper a time to dry a little bit, because the alcohol markers more often than not will dry a little bit lighter. There's not that many colours that actually dry darker. So just sort of keep coming back and forward and working at that. And see if we can eke a little bit more of this colour out for the pedestal that snail is sitting on here. You could also get a very pale yellow. You know, because you get sandstone and stuff like that, that's a very pale yellow. So let's just have a look here. Maybe something like this, mushroom white, which is E286. And we can put little bits of yellow in there as well. And sometimes what I like to do with the stone is I will start to put some dots, and that will be best to show you down here, probably in a bigger area, but I quite often like to do a bit of like pointillism, where you do random dots and make a visual blend, optical blend with the colours by using dots. That's another way that you can depict texture. So I think this mushroom white, I'm going to do the top of the columns here. In that sort of colour, and that little bit there as well. So I'm really enjoying colouring in this book. Unfortunately, it's been a little bit slower for me because I have to wait for good lighting to be able to record. And so I'm not working quite as quickly as I normally would like to. Once a book takes my attention, this is yellow grey 150, and I'm just going to do a darker colour around the edges here. Normally when a book really takes my attention, I can work page after page, you know, over several days with the same book, and I haven't always been able to record, so I've been working in other books instead, but this is really the sort of book that I could happily take away on holiday with me and just work in page after page, and I don't get bored with it. Whereas there are other books that really do bore me when I've tried to work that way. And I've enjoyed using the different types of pencils and mediums and so on in here to do demos for you. I've enjoyed that quite a bit. So I'm going back to warm grey 160 now, so a little bit lighter and warmer. I've been enjoying using all of the different, and I'm going to go back to warm grey 150. But my absolute favourite, I think I have to say, would be using either the alcohol or the water-based marker, and if I need to, put pencil over the top. But I think in these particular books, I really do enjoy working with the markers a lot. So this one's a warm grey from the Audi set. So all I'm doing is looking for the different shades of grey to get some different looks for all the details. Because if I did it with the same grey over and over, none of those details are going to stand out. Okay, so while I've got that one in my hand, I'm going to work across here. So this is the warm grey one. And I think I might start doing in this section here. But I'm also going to bring in the mushroom white for a bit of yellow. So what the yellow does is, on its own, it's suggestive that perhaps it could be sandstone. But using yellow with the grey here in these grey sections could suggest that it's got a bit of lichen or moss or something growing on the stone. And also visually, it's just something different for your eye to look at, and it helps to draw the eye around. So seeing the yellow here, it helps to draw your eye around the whole thing. I'm not sure, but I might try to do some sort of metallic or something different there with that frog, but I don't know at this stage, so I'm going to leave it uncoloured for now. Now I want something that's really light, like this warm grey was, but I need it really, really light. I don't want yellow in it. Let's go with the putty. Putty is E182. So what I'm looking for is a range of very natural neutrals and greys to indicate different types of stone. So just using a light touch there because I'm trying to use the very edge of the chisel tip. The other end is too dry. And these sorts of little details like this is often where I will use the coloured pencil. When I bring extra coloured pencil into something, I find that I like to do the little fiddly, fiddly bits with that coloured pencil. I think I might also bring some of that colour into the walls. So this is putty, if you are trying to follow along. And I've missed a little bit of the window or door frame there. And that was the yellow grey, if I remember rightly. That one. And I've got another pillar there like that one, so let's bring that mushroom white out again for that. Okay, so I'm not sure yet whether I want that to be like an open roof and this is sky, so I might not worry about that for now. I'm going to try bringing in another grey again, yellow grey 010 for this top part of the wall. So I'm thinking potentially down the track that this could be some sort of outdoor, you know, outdoor meeting area or something. So I might get another colour in there again. So this is yellow grey 010, so YG010. And I might use this as the base point for these steps down here, because I will be trying to bring some detail and texture in on there. So just having a look here at what's going on. So I was thinking about what to do today in terms of what colouring materials to use, and I've been feeling really tired and drained, so I felt like alcohol markers might be an easy medium that I can get quick results with. And plus I think the saturated colours work really well with Russell's drawing style. Might do a bit more up there with this yellow grey as well. And I don't mind if it's not finely blended, because it's going to be natural stone or concrete or something. I feel like the more texture and marks and so on that you create, the better it actually is. Alright, so let's show you what I'm talking about here. So I've got the yellow grey base here. I might actually use some more yellow greys with it. So I've got the yellow grey 150, which is up here, and yellow grey, let's have a look. Got 020 and 030. So what I'm looking for, let's move these out of the way, is I'm looking for a gradual change of colour. It's going to be far easier if you use a gradual change of colour over wildly different tones. That's going to be so much harder to blend. So we've got the 010 here is the base, and then I'm going to bring in some 020, and you can see the colour is only sort of marginally darker. So I'm going to do what is the upright part of the step. So, you know, you've got the horizontal part where your foot hits, and then you've got the vertical part there where the step rises. So I've got the 020 and I've got 030. And between those two colours, I'm going to start to depict a little bit of shadow and a little bit of texture. So these little circles and things that Russell's indicated for texture or interest, I might actually bring in one of the mushroom or the putty or something different for that. So start to tell the story. Now, the tread of the steps where your foot hits is always going to be lighter. You know, the light's going to hit that much more than it is these vertical parts. Now, these are a bit tricky because he's got fancy steps here. You've got the part that your foot actually hits, and then the little edge or lip of it, and then you've got the vertical bit underneath. So the depth of tone, the depth of colour is what's going to tell the story about what part of the step you're colouring, and let the viewer work out, you know, the perspective and the depth of somebody going up those steps. So a little bit there where that little lip is, and then blend that down. We'll worry about all the rest of it later. I'm just looking now to see which areas I can darken up that need to either describe what's happening or a shadow. And we've got a little bit here that's too light behind there. Now where he's standing in front of this pillar or the edge of the staircase will be darker than, you know, anywhere else as well, because he's standing in front of it blocking the light. And that will need to be darkened up again as we go. It's a bit of a constant back and forward process working out how to do that. And again, here we need just that little bit of dark behind there so that we can start to bring Mr Fogherty forward and show that these characters are well in front of that thing there. They're not casting a shadow on it because it's too far behind, but visually we just want to send it backwards and bring the characters forward. So we can start to put maybe a bit of putty into these bits, and also we'll use that mushroom white again. So what I start to do is I start to get a few different shades again and start to do some dots and blend it out. So you want more intense colour here in the shade or the shadow, and then blend that out. But that's how we start to put some texture into the stone or the concrete, whatever you want to portray it as. I'm kind of thinking stone. And then we might even go darker still. This is the 150, and put a bit of that in there. Go back to the mid-grey again. And that's how I build the colour up with dots. And show that there's texture there and it's not completely smooth. So again, the same. And remember, you don't have to do this everywhere to make a big impact. You think to yourself, okay, well that looks good, I'll do it everywhere. But it loses its impact that if you do the same thing and treat everything the same way. Okay, so that's the sort of thing that I do to start building up detail on stone. And the whole point is to try and make it a little bit random, because things in nature don't always happen with a pattern. That's the wrong one. Not that it matters, but mushroom white again. Yeah, when things happen in nature, they don't necessarily happen in neat, tidy patterns and everything matching. So keep that in mind when you're working, that when you come to natural organic substances, it's not like a, you know, painted area, for example. There will be variations and different things will be happening, and it's not all going to be exactly the same shade of colour. There's going to be all sorts of things happening with it. So if you want to try and portray something that's describing, you know, a real natural thing, then think about how these special effects might be used. But if you just want a flat colour as well, then, you know, that's fine as well. But I'm just showing you how I, when I'm in the mood, like to do these sorts of textures and these sorts of details to help, you know, describe things and tell a story. So I can see now that the edge here, as it's dried, the tread and the very edge of it hasn't, you know, there's no variation there in the colour. So I'm going to go for the YG020 and just deepen up that edge of the tread. Now you could do it that, you know, this could be all different types of stone. So the top part of the tread might be lighter, but you might have decided to put something darker on those other bits. That's entirely up to you to work out whether you want to go to that much trouble. And again, all I do with the markers is every time I let a layer dry, I see whether I feel like it's got enough contrast or not, and I come back and put a bit of extra something in there. So, you know, that's dried, but not necessarily enough. So I just keep putting a little bit in there as it dries and build it up. And I'm trying to work quickly because I'm really conscious of not keeping you too long and boring you to tears. But if you're working on your own, you would maybe be taking a little bit more care about it than I am here, and building your colours up and so on. Okay, so let's move on to something else now. And I have a habit of mixing my lids up sometimes, so just be careful there. Okay, so let's try Nero. And he looks like he's a toad rather than a frog, doesn't he? So we might go for a more olive sort of shade of green, I think. That's deep olive green. And bronze green. And maybe a little bit of chartreuse. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So deep olive green is G345. I'll start with that one. And I'm going to do his hands. What do you call it on a frog? Is it his hands, or has he got feet? 4 feet. When you're colouring these imaginary characters, we tend to humanise everything, don't we? So this is the chartreuse that I'm blending in with that. And I'll come back later probably and put some different colours into his spotty areas. And I'm going to do a bit of chartreuse there on his face, because that will be probably where the light is hitting it most. This is now the deep olive green again. And And all these little circles and markings that he's got on his face that are a bit wart-like, I can always come back later and put other colours over that. So I'm putting a bit of the darker colour to the edges of his eyelids here to try and get a sense of those eyelids are covering something that's round. So that darker green, which was the bronze green, I'll use that to do these sort of warty round dots and markings and stuff on him. And I'll do his toes sticking out there in that colour. And a little bit of that on his leg here. Now his knee needs to be a little bit lighter because the light will be catching that top part of his leg. And I'm going to leave that bronze green, I think, for now. Leave that darker. And also where his arms are coming out from under his armour there, or breastplate, not sure of the terminology. And let's use that bronze green again. On those markings. Now the chartreuse will be hitting the top of that leg and knee as well. Now I'm not taking that right up to the line, that's the bronze green. And I'm actually putting a little bit of chartreuse in there and blending that because I want it to try and leave it a little bit lighter than the green of his foot. We'll see whether that works. Because his foot here is going to be a lot darker than what his leg is. Do that. Okay, and then just for his lip, a light layer of the chartreuse. Okay, and the what is this called, wreath or thing on his head, we go for a different green so that it stands out from him. So might go for pale green. It could be gold. I'm thinking like a natural one, but it could be gold that he's got there. Okay, so that's the figure of Nero. Let's do Mr Fogherty next. I might do him in a combination of chartreuse, which is G487, and petit pois, which is G468. So what I might do is start with the chartreuse first. And then petit pois. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Don't come at me if you're French speaking, because I do apologise, I don't speak any other language, so I'm probably pronouncing that completely wrong. Okay. And I don't mind leaving Mr Fogherty a bit patchy, because my chartreuse here is getting very, very dry. I don't mind so much leaving him a bit patchy, because I can always use coloured pencil if I need to cover any of those streaky patchy areas up. You can see maybe how dry these are getting, because they're not bleeding over the line like they usually would. If you hear any little whimpers or noises, I've got Hamish in the house. He's in the other room at the moment, but I can hear him. I think he's dreaming. So the Easter long weekend is fast approaching here. Here in Australia we get a 4-day weekend. In recent years they've started to let the shops open on the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, but it used to be that the shops would close for a whole 4 days and everyone would go crazy doing their grocery shopping and so on for 4 days, because the stores were going to be closed for so long. It was like Armageddon was, coming. But in recent years we have had the day in between to shop for more food if we need to. So I'm colouring this for you on Wednesday. And I know I've got a busy couple of days coming up. We're going to do our family get together on Good Friday. So I will be making lunch for 9 of us. And I don't know what else we're going to do for the rest of the weekend. We haven't actually made plans. We had talked about doing some painting. But I don't think either of us, my husband and I, we're not feeling particularly motivated to do that just yet. I want to actually paint the spare room studio. He's ended up looking very similar to the toad, but maybe I can darken this up with some coloured pencil and change the tone a little bit, perhaps. And these guys here look like they're turtles, I think, maybe. Not sure if I've got that right. We've got a cricket up here as well, but I think he needs to be a different type of green. I'm thinking maybe like a vivid green. Vivid green and pale green maybe. So let's go with pale green to start with. So I feel like doing him as a bright green cricket grasshopper. So talking of greens, I'm thinking about painting my studio in a sage green. I've been looking at some pictures on Pinterest and looking for some ideas of, what sort of shade of green might be nice. The room it's not the brightest, but it's also not too dark either, if you know what I mean. We've got a small veranda outside the window, so that keeps the main sun from hitting the window directly, but it does let quite a bit of light in. And I was going to keep the walls really light and neutral, but I've always liked green, and I've got a feeling that I would like to make this room not be a sterile light colour, but I want it to be, let's put a little bit in there as well. I want it to be a place of relaxation and refuge, so I'm thinking that green might be a good colour for that. I'm going to put that on his wings. And really lightly so far on the body. Okay, and we might just do those as well. So that's what I've got in mind. I'm thinking of doing that soon. We've been waiting for the weather to cool down, and we had a few days where it did cool off a little bit, and then it got really warm again. It's been in the low 30s for over a week or so again. And so I'm going to do these guys a combination of Lye Colour E289 and From Dust E371. So Lye Colour first. So the painting got put on hold because we had all the issues with the gas leak, and the painting got put on hold because while we had no hot water, there was no way I was going to be doing painting, getting all hot and sweaty and messy and not be able to shower easily. So then we thought, well, we'll put it off to Easter, the Easter weekend, because my husband's got 4 whole days off of work. And I'm going to put a little bit of that colour into these steps as well. That's the From Dust. I'm going to leave that little bit under his chin there light for now. And I also want to do the eyelids in a lighter colour, so I'll have to find a nice cream or off-white colour for that. So yeah, we sort of thought we might have some painting for this weekend, but we haven't arranged anything. We've got no paint in yet. I haven't fully decided on which colour. I've got a whole heap of paint chips in various shades of green. And that lighter colour can be for their legs as well. So I think it's yellow is a good colour for creativity, but I don't know that I want yellow walls. So I do like green. I have had green walls in another house before, and I really like green. I find green to be a really nice, relaxing colour that, you know, you feel like you're getting amongst nature sort of feeling. I'm mixing those up a bit there. Okay, so a lighter colour for their eyelids and maybe under the chin there cream colour this is. So just a little bit of colour going up there. And then get that lie. And just a little bit and blend that back in. And that will do for that. Okay, so robes. I think I'd like to give him some really colourful robes because everything else is so bland so far that yeah, I want to give him something bright. So I think I might go for red. Okay, so I'm going to start with vermilion, R687. Now I'm thinking like red is a power colour, so I don't know what the true colours would have been back then, but this is a colouring book and not a history book, so I'm using tomato R872 to do the darker suggestions of shadows and help describe what's going on here with the folds in the fabric. So we'll do that, and we'll also put some red in there. And let's do all of this red. I guess he's the star of the show today, not Mr Fogherty. And his matches, we'll just do the little tips of his matches. So remember, as this dries, we'll come back and add some more if we need to. And then his, what do you call that? Is it a chest plate or something like that? We might use a light grey. I've got plenty of light greys out here, haven't I? So let's go with warm grey 160. And that's on there. Oh, I've actually missed a thumb there as well. And let's do these things grey. Might be nice to use some metallic pen, something shiny and reflective on some of the decorations on here and whatever this thing is called. do. When in doubt, when something is a bit hard to work out, I usually go for a neutral grey or beige tone, and then once I know what I'm doing, I bring colour in elsewhere if I'm finding it really tricky to work out what's what. I'm thinking on here, instead of more red, I'd like to bring some orange yellow. So this is Marigold Y792. Just to bring a bit of extra colour in, because you know, we are looking very grey and green. And if I put some gold pen on anywhere here, it will work out quite well that there'll be no white showing through. And let's go back to the vermilion. This is where it can get tricky using the alcohol markers. If you've only got a big nib, it can get a bit tricky going in between all of these little details with your alcohol marker, and that would be, we'll do that like it's leather, maybe. Right, Vigogne, Vignone, I don't know, E761. So let's leave an area there for a highlight and get that marigold. There we go, and we've got a bit of a highlight there going on that. And I need a green to do these toes that I missed and his thumb. So a lot of people here in Australia go away at Easter for a long weekend camping or doing something like that, because it's usually a time where the weather is still quite nice and predictable, you know, before the weather changes. So now that we have a dog, that's a little bit harder for us to do. We still haven't trialled him going too far in the car, and we have to, we'd have to find a dog-friendly caravan park or somewhere to stay. So we've decided that the first time that we have a go at doing something like that with him will be best when it's a quiet time of the year, when the children aren't on school holidays, because our kids are actually on school holidays now. And we'll test him out, you know, during a much quieter time. Okay, let's come down to Mr Fogherty here. And instead of red, we might give him, I think a nice blue for his cape would be nice. So for the highlight, I'm going to use pastel blue, and then the real colour is going to be Sapphire B956, pastel blue is B289. So this is the Sapphire. Alright, yep. And then I'm going to use the pastel blue to blend all of that. So we're planning to do, as I mentioned, a family get-together on Good Friday. So Evie is very lucky that not only does she have all her full cohort of grandparents, she's still got, let me think now, 6 great-grandparents. And they like to see her on the holidays, of course, so we try to do that. And my father has got a birthday coming up soon, so it's chance to celebrate that with him, you know, with Evie. And the weather is supposed to be high 20s Celsius, I believe, so it will be nice to have a barbecue. And it's also going to be interesting to see how Hamish, the dog, copes with all that, because the first few times we've done things, he's been obviously quite scared because there have been all the extra people around, but he coped with Christmas very well. So I don't foresee any real problem with him in terms of not being able to cope with all the extra noise and so on. I might put some gold or something different in there on that detail there. Now, I'm also going to give him blue for here. So I've been really trying not to look at too closely at how people have been colouring pages in this book, so that I don't get too influenced, because sometimes when you see how other people have coloured a page, even though you don't mean to, it's there subconsciously, and you start choosing, you know, similar colour scheme without even realising it. And I'm trying for that to not happen. Maybe that colour can be on the detail of his helmet. And I need to go for a light grey for his armour, I think. Let's go for the yellow grey 010. please let me know in the comments if you'd like to share, if you're going away or doing anything special at Easter. Let me know what your plans are, or are you going to have a nice few quiet days at home? I think I'd like to go for a lighter blue. This thing in the top here, so this is turquoise blue, G191, and I'm going to do that on there. And I might also do these in turquoise blue as well. It's really dry at that bottom end, small end. So I'm going to have to try and be careful with the bullet tip. And I'm actually going to give him blue sandals. I know they would have brown Roman sandals probably, but I'm going to go for that blue. And I'm also going to do the matchbox in a grey, and that turquoise blue is actually going to be the shadows on there. I can't remember how I've done it on other pages, but that will do. And then let's use the putty for the matchstick itself. Now back to E761 Vion, and that's what I'll do for the bottom of the sandal. And I'll also do the straps on his leg armour in the brown. Now these guys, I'm going to give them brown sandals. And I'm also going to give them brown spots. And I'm going to use that mushroom white E286, and that's going to be the colour of their robes. I haven't quite worked out what's going on here. I think that's all a robe. So let's go over to the big chisel tip. what I might do with this guy, he's got that stripe around there. I'm actually going to make that the same sort of blue, turquoise, was it? Turquoise blue G191. And then from dust is going to be that sort of darker colour for the folds. So let's just work on that a little bit. So we want to try and portray that the fabric has all these folds and is very draped. So some of these greys have faded, you know, like dried so light. Once they dry, it's hard to see some of them, but it's there. Okay, a slightly darker grey. So this is warm grey 4 in the Aldi range. I'm just going to use, I want a darker grey in this chest plate or body plate, whatever you call it. Now the very soft grey, the Y010, yeah, that's a yellow grey. YG010. I'm just going to use that to shade the eyes where the eyelids go over and to just try and indicate that Mr Fogherty's eyes are round. And I'll just go back into some of these areas and see if we can deepen up. And then that darker one, I'm going to use that for these. I think of them as rivets. I'm not sure what they are, but that looks better. I might use that for a stick. Maybe some golds or metallics or something on there. So the cream colour, I'm going to do this little bit around the neck there. Now this turquoise blue, I'm not sure if these are leaves or feathers, but I think I might do them as feathers. And let's use the vivid green. So I'm just trying to get a bit of detail into things now. And Snail's hiding up here, but I haven't thought about what colour I want to do Snail just yet, so let's go back to the grey just to do that tie. And how's that looking for you guys through the camera? It's actually looking darker on here than what it is in real life, so I might have to play around with that, how I show you. So we want an extra colour around here, so I'm thinking that maybe From Dust E371, so slightly darker colour again. Okay, now the ground down here, we might go for some warm greys and some browns. We'll use all what we've already got here. So this is the warm grey one, which is similar to warm grey 160 in the Ohuhus. Okay, and with that I'm going to use putty. It's really starting to dry up now. Let's go back to the warm grey. And I don't want my edges to be nice and neat. I haven't drawn a border around it or anything, so these edges are all going to be rather random and haphazard, organic feeling. So now I need to get a combination of different darker greys. I'll use From Dust and brown maybe. And I'm going to start doing some random dots and things like that. And then what did I use? What was that lightest colour there? The putty. It might be a bit of a problem when it comes to doing dots because this end is so dry now. Let's just blend that out with the go around some of these circles that Russell's drawn. So what it's about here is just getting the different colours and the textures. It's not necessarily about drawing stones in and, you know, being too fussy with it. I need a darker grey as well. So let's go back to the YG 150. And also I'm using the mushroom white as well. Let's start getting some of the darker grey in there as well. Some bits of brown. And the mushroom white. Okay, and with that darker grey again, let's get these shadows a little bit more defined. So again, there's no real formula for this. This is just basically my personal preference and what looks good to me, and it might not look good to you. But I just keep going at it and dotting up the colour here until I feel like there's enough interest, enough variety, you know, and I've got something different there and a bit varied. Then I let it dry and I come back and have a look at it when it's dry, and just keep doing that until I'm happy. Hopefully you've been able to see some of that. Didn't realise that that was so low off of the camera there. So the other thing to show you is, of course, that you can use your, oh, this colourless blender has dried out as well by the look of it. My colourless blenders do dry up very quick. Okay, so you can use a colourless blender to put some texture and colour into, well, not colour, but it takes the colour out more than anything. But what it does is it puts some texture in there. Where it lifts the colour out, it can sometimes leave like a little hard edge. And so the colourless blender is actually quite useful for building up some texture. And you might be able to see here that it's actually taking that colour out quite well. So if you feel like you've gone too dark somewhere with the alcohol blenders, you can use your colourless blender to come in and lift a little bit of colour out, do some texture. And these little guys, if they're looking too solid, just little dots. Same with Mr Fogherty's skin. Okay. Wherever you feel like it's lacking a highlight, you went too dark, just use your colourless blender to lift a bit of colour out, and I'll show you that at the end probably, what that looks like. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to develop. So where I went over those lines, let me see if we can take some of that back out. And sometimes it's only just a subtle bit that it takes out, but it's enough. So I might have to take a little break and I'll come back to you. I'll let this dry thoroughly. Got markers everywhere. So, to show you a little bit of the close-up. And then down here on the concrete, or the stone. This is how I build the texture up, just with lots and lots of dots. And you might be able to see in there where the colourless blender has taken a bit of colour out, but it's also left those little hard edges and a bit of texture. So okay, so I'm going to let that dry thoroughly, have a little break, and then I will come back to it. It became quite noisy in the background in this part of the recording, so I've decided to speed it up and do a voiceover. I had the window open, it became very windy and there was a lot of background noise, so just to save you listening to all of that, I've decided to do it this way. And I'm not really doing anything different, I'm just finishing off with alcohol markers and then I move on to coloured pencil for some detail work. But I'm using the Audi Creative Place marker here again. I should be okay with these because I've only used greys and blues, but please keep in mind if you do try some of these cheaper alcohol marker sets, they do have a tendency with the yellow, orange, brown and red. Anything that's got quite a strong yellow base to it, it tends to yellow. And by that I mean it's not bleeding through the page as you're using the alcohol marker. It's actually once you close the book, it, I don't know how to describe it because I don't know exactly technically how it works, but it does leach yellow out onto the adjoining pages. So if you're using a cheaper marker brand, you're not sure if it's going to be safe. So far I've been okay with Ohuhu. It hasn't done that with any colours that I've used, although I don't use black. So I do believe that some black alcohol markers can do it as well. But you can put the paper on adjoining pages to stop that staining or affecting any of your other pages, or you can use the plastic protector sleeves that you put documents in ring binders. Just cut the section off that has the holes in there for putting it into the ring binder, open up the side, and you can slip those page protectors over your page, and that will stop any of that yellowing from affecting other pages, because it's very annoying if you spent a lot of time colouring and you're proud of your work and your book, you don't want to have that happen and potentially you ruin any pages that you've already coloured, or I've had it go through several pages and ruin several pages I've yet to colour. So that's something to keep in mind. So here I'm just using all the colours that I've already mentioned previously, so all the different warm browns, mushroom white and putty and so on. I'm using all of those just in different areas to start creating a little bit of texture as well. So on the ground in the foreground and on the stone steps and everything. Just using it in different ways again to create texture and get a little bit of variety going. But at this point, I don't like to introduce too many new colours at this stage because it's getting to the point where it's quite well resolved. I've got a good idea of, you know, the colours where I want them and so on. And usually it's a case now of just putting some contrast in, and I usually do that by adding some Prismacolor white if I need to for a highlight, or just darker shades of the colours I already have to make some shadows and deepen up the tones. So if anything, I will only bring in maybe a deep purple, a deep green or brown or something like that to put into the shadows, but I don't usually introduce too many new colours at this point in time. In this particular section where I do the ground where Nero is standing at the top of the stairs there, I just want it to look like it's a different type of stone maybe, so I've given it that colour so that it just looks a little bit more visually interesting than doing it all the same colour that the steps are. No other reason than that, you know, I just want a little bit of variety but without actually bringing too many new colours in. So I just use them in different areas in different ways, and starting to look at areas where I need to darken up so that I can bring one section forward more than another, and start to work out those issues of contrast and really just sort of finishing up. I could have left it with just the alcohol markers and it would have been perfectly adequate, but I do go on to bring some coloured pencils in the end because I just feel like I can add that something extra to it for the sake of the video, to show you what is possible or what you can do, but you don't have to do any of this. And if I was colouring off camera, a lot of the time I would stop a lot sooner than I do when I'm on camera, because recording videos for you means that I try and put that little bit extra in there just to show you all the possibilities. But when I'm colouring on my own, sometimes I do just want to keep things quite simple, and I am quite happy at times to leave it all in one particular type of medium, so all alcohol markers or all water-based markers, and the pencils very rarely make much impact really. It's just that little bit at the end. But as I say, I just think when I'm recording for you, I feel like I need to show you all the possibilities that you could do with your work. So here I'm introducing some gel pen, and I just wanted it to look like this outdoor temple or meeting place, whatever it is. It had a few bits of metallic on it to make it look a little bit special. So I thought that little thing at the top there looked like it would be some sort of memorial or plaque to commemorate Nero, and you know, he would feel a little bit self-important and need to have metallic on something like that. So all I'm doing is bringing in a little bit of metallic for some shine in different areas, and really no other purpose than that. I don't use a lot of metallic pens to colour as such. I just use them for that little bit of embellishment, and really again, I don't feel that I need to a lot, because once I've finished colouring this book and it gets put away, I very rarely come back and have a look at it. So things like the embellishments, sparkle, shine, metallic and so on, aren't really required when the book just gets put away and nobody actually looks at it. So I can be quite lazy when it comes to adding those things to my own pictures. I like looking at other people's work. I do like looking at how creative some people can be with it, but personally I don't see a need to do it, so I don't often do it. So I'm using the Prismacolor here over the top of the alcohol marker, mostly because the Prismacolor have a really good range of greys, and the greys really do complement and go quite well with the range of greys that are in the Ohuhu alcohol markers. So you've got cool grey, warm grey, French grey and so on. So they all have that slightly different tint to them, which make them very, very useful for describing and colouring these things that are in backgrounds, or not necessarily needing to be super bright and vibrant. So I always like to use the Prismacolor with alcohol markers especially, because it just helps to bring in that little bit of texture, but it matches very well with the range of greys that I have in the Ohuhu markers. I'm also bringing in a few different types of green. At this point I am starting to fiddle a bit. There really isn't a great deal of need to do some of this, but what it does do is bring in some of the contrast and the deeper colours that you just need to help describe what's going on a little bit better. Sometimes with the alcohol markers, especially if you have just the fine tip like I do and not a brush tip marker, there are some areas that might be a little bit too small and too detailed for you to get in with the nib of an alcohol marker, and of course alcohol marker ink can bleed quite easily. So in those instances it can be very useful to bring in a coloured pencil that you can sharpen and get into those really small areas that just might need a little bit of something to help colours pop, or to help describe something, or tidy up little edges where the alcohol marker might have left some white showing. When I watch these videos back when I'm editing and just checking that everything's okay, I can see there are times when I start to overwork things and fiddle a little bit too much just for the sake of it. But I think too that that's partly because recording for YouTube means that sometimes it's very easy to feel like you need to make things look a little bit more complicated than they really are, when most times when I'm colouring on my own I do like to keep things rather simple, and I don't necessarily need to overcomplicate things either. There's also that point where you feel like, you know, you're recording and it's too hard to do the editing and refix things and so on, so you just keep going because you know that it's recording. So bear in mind that sometimes you might watch me do this and think, why is she doing that? She doesn't need to be adding all that. And sometimes I don't. So again, it's very much a personal preference thing. Some people are really happy to stop at a point where their colours are much lighter and, you know, very simply done. And other people like things to look very saturated, deep in colour, and have every little tiny bit of detail done. So there is a place for everything, of course, and you know, it's up to you to decide what you like when it comes to these things. Now what I'm doing here is I'm starting to introduce colours from each of the characters into other parts of the picture. So while I was working on Mr Fogherty's outfit there, I decided that that particular blue was not used anywhere else in the picture, and therefore to help him make sense, you know, like he's a part of the story and why he's there and so on, it's useful to use some colour from that character into other parts of the composition. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm using the various colours. So the colour that I got out to use on the cricket or grasshopper, whatever he is there, that's fanning Nero. I thought that by bringing that particular green into other parts of the picture, it helps to draw your eye around the whole composition. So instead of focusing just in on one particular section and thinking, oh gee, that's interesting, that's really well coloured, whatever, but you don't tend to look anywhere else because it's all a bit flat and a bit boring. But if you see that colour, that little tiny bit of pop of colour in another area of the picture, it just helps to draw your eye around the whole composition. So that's what I'm doing there, and I've used the blue in the shadows and that pop of green onto various bits of the stone, because the greys in the stonework can look rather flat and dead, and although in real life there would not be that little tiny bit of colour on there, just using it does help to make the picture a little bit more interesting. And here I'm using Prismacolor white to reinstate some highlights, but I don't necessarily want every highlight to be white. And by that I mean that those areas where I have introduced the white onto the red robes that Nero is wearing, it looks very unnatural, and it just does not look right. So what I like to do is put the white highlight in, work out just sort of how bright or how light I want that to be. And there I'm just sort of doing the middle of the tread of the steps that are leading up to Nero, because if that's nice and bright and highlighted, it also is kind of leading your eye through the picture to him, because he probably is the centre of attention this time over Mr Fogherty. He's probably a little bit more centre of the story, even more so than Mr Fogherty is. And so any little tips and tricks that you can do to lead the eye in to Nero is helpful. So once I've got all those highlights into place, then I look at it and decide whether they need to be white highlights or whether they need to be colours, and I will tone the white highlight down with a little bit of the corresponding colour. So here I'm just putting in a few darks. If I remember rightly, I think this might have been, it could have been indigo. I don't think it's black, it looks like it might be indigo to me. So I'm just putting a few shadows in again, so getting the highlight in, getting some dark shadows in is starting to get the contrast, working. And then again, I feel like Nero needs a little bit of lightening up in places because he was looking dark all over and there was no real contrast going on with him. And also toning down a little bit of the yellow chartreuse that I had used to portray him. I don't think that I remember to go back and do that turtle that's at the front there where I put some highlight on his face. I can't remember as I'm doing this. I think I may have left it a little bit too light, but also part of the problem is when you're doing work on video too, is that the lighting sometimes picks up highlights and makes them look a lot brighter than they actually are in real life. So the same thing happens with photographs too, that sometimes in real life that highlight is a lot more subtle and better suited, but when you take the photograph or look back on the video, it can look a bit unnatural. So I think from memory, I don't remember to tone that down, but it actually doesn't look that obvious when I look at the book in real life. So I'm also using some gold metallic pencil here. Again, I know a lot of people don't like metallic pencils, but I actually do quite like the metallic gold, bronze and silver that come with this Prismacolor set. and I do often use them just for these little bits of you know, just little bits of interest around the place. So the areas where I use the orangey yellow to suggest gold, I've gone over them and toned them down with the metallic pencil or the gel pen. Sometimes with the gel pen it skips and misses and you get white showing through, so if you've used a colour as a base and then use the gel pen over the top of it, that does help to mitigate some of those little white spots where the gel pen skips and misses and they're not quite so obvious. So I'm lifting the book up to show you what it looks like closer up with all those textured areas, how I've done the ground with the dots, bringing in the extra colours and so on. And I think this is where I realised that that white highlight on the red robes is really jarring and not looking too great at all. So I think to start with, I use a little bit of a blender pencil here to blend some of the areas in that should be smooth. There are some things that you portray that should look textured and some things that should look smooth, and I decide that his skin there is looking a bit too blotchy, so I've tried using the Prismacolor blender pencil there just to smooth that out a little bit. And I've also started to notice some of the areas where I've missed little details, or I've missed just getting the marker right up to the edges. So with a much lighter shade of red there, I've decided to tone down that white highlight, and you can see what a big difference that makes. You can still see that there's a highlight there, but it looks much more natural than what the white pencil did. The Prismacolor blender pencil does leave lots of little small crumbs when you blend with it, so that's why I have that little fan brush there and I'm constantly brushing it away. So I'm starting to feel that this is much more how I'm happy to leave it. I'm getting to the point where, you know, this is pretty much finished. So I will take this opportunity to say thank you for watching and being with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. And in a moment I will be showing you a little bit of the details there where I did cover up the white highlight, and it looks far more natural that way. I'm quite happy with it now. So this is pretty much done, and yes, thank you for being with me. I hope that this is helpful to see how I work with the various mediums, and the next page is the Merry Monks. So hopefully you will join me to watch how I colour that page. Take care everyone. Bye now.